Good morning, Dan and Amy. Amy, we've been talking all morning about,
Catholicism.
well, that's part of it. Also, the split between men and women on Trump versus Clinton. Trump minus 33 among women. That's a historic deficit. Plus 11 among men. What can he do to minimize the loss among the female electorate in order to win the presidency? I've been soliciting people's take on that and came up with an idea. I want to run it by you. What do you think?
He could stop groping women.
Well, that's sure. Yeah.
Allegedly.
I've
got my starting 6 here.
Alleged past bad acts that the New York Times reported yesterday, and including a 35-year-old instance allegedly in first class on a plane. But we'll get to those. But here's my general idea: reverse Lysistrata.
What?
Lysistrata, Chirac. The recent movie that Spike Lee made was based on the Lysistrata, the Greek tragedy or comedy, and the idea that women should withhold sex in order to quell the violence, right? Right. So what if husbands withhold sex from their wives in order to get them to vote for Trump, since Trump is plus 11 among men and minus 33 among women? What do you think about that? How do you think that would work?
You know what? I don't think that would work. I appreciate the idea.
Yeah, I'm just spitballing.
And the thoughtfulness, but no, I don't think that's going to work.
No.
I don't know if anything can work at this point in time.
All right, well, let's see if we've got any better ideas than that one. We're happy to be joined now by Michael Goodwin. He's a New York Post columnist, Fox News contributor. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Good morning.
Good morning. So you wrote a piece the other day. This was after the first round of Podesta email leaks that the New York Times, which was exposed as being one of those outlets collaborating with the Clinton campaign, had essentially sacrificed whatever journalistic integrity it had on the pyre of getting Hillary Clinton elected. Explain your view on that and what you think about their story yesterday with the accusations being leveled against Trump by multiple women.
Right. First to the issue of integrity, I think this is something that is doing permanent damage to the New York Times, and because of it being such a status, the flagship of American journalism to many people, I think it's going to hurt journalism in general. And the issue is that the Times, and I should say I started my career there. I worked there for 16 years, starting right out of college. And it had a true separation of what was called there church and state. So the opinion side of the newspaper had its own editor, its own reporting system to the publisher, and the news side had a separate reporting system and its own editor. And the publisher presided over both. But this church-state separation was to protect the news side from the influences of the institutional opinions. And it was rigorously enforced to the point where I, starting as a clerk and then a lowly reporter, any time I came near to suggesting a personal opinion, it was talk about your bleach bit. This was the days of whiteout. Everything was erased. And, of course, I wasn't alone. That was the rule of the paper. We're here to present the facts, not your opinion. If we want an opinion, we have the editorial page, we have the op-ed columnists. Reporters, editors, and the news side are not to venture into that turf. And as I say, it was called church and state for the same reason that the idea that there would not be an official American church was to protect all the other churches also. So, and to protect civilian life. So in the same way, that was the Times ethos for many, many years. What has happened now is the editor, a man named Dean Baquette, has effectively authorized reporters to give their own opinions in their stories. And you can read it every day, and you will see it sounds and reads more like opinion on the front page and in every story. There are no longer, when it comes to politics especially, straight news stories. They're all loaded with the opinion of maybe the editor in charge, maybe the writer, maybe it's the headline, maybe it's the choice of the photo. Everything is done to convey a position, a partisan position.
Right.
And this will outlive this campaign. Once you let that genie out of the bottle, there's no way to put it back in.
So this morning's article in the New York Times about the two women that, from 30 plus years ago that Donald Trump allegedly groped, one on a plane, the other, he kissed. Do you think that was reckless and irresponsible of them to run that story?
Well, look, I think the 30 years to me, is an issue. Some of the women, and I'm not sure, I haven't seen the Times story, but stories are popping up everywhere with women more recently than 30 years. Look, the Times tried a 30-year story way back months ago with Trump and women 30 years ago. These were women he had dated. How did he treat them? Look, the Times is clearly out to get Trump. They have made no qualms about that. When I on Twitter, you will see Times reporters piling into the story today. Reporters who are not associated with it, but who are Times reporters. Clearly, they think they're going to bring down Trump, and they may well do that. But I think the danger is that you have now unleashed this beast of opinion writing throughout the paper, and to where the paper will only be read by people who agree with it, who agree with those opinions, and nobody else will be able to trust it because it will be so loaded and so obviously tilted toward one. So what's going to happen in the next election? What's going to happen if Hillary Clinton becomes president? Is the paper going to be, are the reporters able to criticize her when she's president, or must they continue to support her when she's president? So I think this is uncharted territory for what is the most important news organization in America and the most influential still, because a lot of papers, a lot of TV stations take their cue from the New York Times. The New York Times news service is very prominent. So I think this is a huge change in American journalism that will have profound impacts for years and years.
Well, right. The groupthink that you describe, I guess there'll be a market reaction to that at some point, as you say. If it's only going to be preaching to the choir, then fewer people are going to attend that service, and there are many more outlets popping up. We see the attrition and daily readership of the big urban-centered newspapers, and I suppose that will continue.
Right. Look, I think people generally do not understand how American journalism was different, say, from European journalism or most other developed countries. Their newspapers and radio and TV are all very closely aligned with political parties. America was different. America did have general interest newspapers that strived mightily, even though, of course, they were owned by local businessmen or families for generations. But every town in America had newspapers that were independent, and they strived to reflect the local culture, people in it, the common good. Of course, there was less than idealism in many cases, but I think this is now going to change. I think we've now entered a new era of partisan newspapers throughout the country, and I think that there's something great. There's a great loss to our civic culture.
I wanted to get your reaction to this piece in one of those kind of alternative outlets that are finding success in the wake of people fleeing old media outlets. That's thefederalist.com. Ben Domenech writes, here's what's going to happen to the GOP if Trump loses. Nothing. Nothing's going to change. He writes, the Republican Party will be torn in two different directions. Trumpists will abandon it because they believe it was insufficiently pro-Trump. Anti-Trumpists will abandon it because it nominated Trump. And no personnel will change because there's no movement afoot to replace Ryan or replace McConnell. So the party will just continue limping along, perhaps with majorities still in Congress. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I think if Trump goes down in big flames, it's hard to see how the Republicans will hold either house. Clinton has already started signaling that she is moving in that direction, attacking Marco Rubio in Florida. She clearly wants a Democratic Congress, at least a Democratic Senate. The House is a little tougher, but it could go too. Look, there will be a Republican Party. It's not going to disappear. But the question is it any kind of oppositional party at all? Does it have any strength in Washington? What happens in the state houses in this election and the midterm elections? I mean, we saw a great realignment in the states under the Obama years, where Democrats lost governorships, they lost state legislators, they lost the entire farm system for the federal government, and the tide could be moving in the opposite direction now.
All right, he is Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you both very much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.